Hey guys, welcome to the channel. So about 2 months ago, I started building a system and recorded the whole build until the end. And now we're making videos. This is not really a how-to tutorial because, one day of building is like 4 to 8 hours of constant brain shaking, testing ideas, discarding them, and debugging. But I know none of you would sit down for more than an hour of that. So instead, it'll be more like me just fast forwarding, talking about the steps I took, why I did certain things, and maybe throwing in a little random conversation here and there. But I hope that in doing so, um, you'll learn something from it and hopefully teach me new things that you think I could have done differently. Thanks for sticking through the boring introduction. Now let's continue with the authentication of the system, part 2. Right now, I am building the login helper function inside the auth controller. It takes in email and password, sanitizes the data, makes sure it's not empty, and checks if the email really has a mail structure in it, like it contains an at and a dot, etc. Now we are making the authentication function, which comes from the auth model. It takes in the email or username and password, then uses that email to get the user with that email. That's what we are doing now in the function getUserDetails. If a user was returned, we verify their password and return true if it matches or false if it doesn't. Have I already mentioned this is a mock that I changed later? Because it just seems lazy, right? No robust error handlers with messages. Now, if the user does exist and the password was correct, then we add the user data into a session. You should know about the session variable, but it doesn't work without the session start function. So where is that function? It will be in the route that uses these classes. Now, I am trying to create schemas for all tables that are associated with the user and its authentication service. I asked Chatty to add classes I had overlooked. So why did I do that? Well, this authentication won't just be validate user and we're done. I want more. I want to be able to add and revoke user permissions on the fly. So this is a little more challenging than it seems because it means I'll need full control and the user roles will have to be flexible, not just simple default permissions per role. So like and subscribe to see the end result. The more support I get, the more I'll expand on this, like making a longer video that breaks down the mechanism in detail. That way you won't miss any important lessons. Right now I'm just creating a JavaScript function that sends requests to my system. Yes, let's go with that, instead of my backend. Why? Because if I say backend, I know a lot of beginners might get confused. See, I do understand how beginners think sometimes. Here's the point. The JavaScript code is served from my server, yes. But once your browser loads it, that code runs in the browser, not on the backend. Its job is to send requests to the backend of my system. So the code itself isn't backend, it just talks to it. Now, I am just designing the front end. The requests are not reaching the backend because we have not defined the endpoint of the API yet. So all these errors are on purpose, just to see how it will look, hehe. Now I will just create a JavaScript file, move the code into it, and then add it to the page through a script tag. Now I think we're moving to the back end. As you can see, when I load the page that is supposed to be our endpoint link, it is not found. And this is the back end where we need it to hit. So right now, I'm just going to add a rewrite rule in the .htaccess. I think I should have a video just for this too. .htaccess is a very powerful tool and line of defense. And the best part is, if you try to understand .htaccess rules, you will start to open your mind to server operations as well, I think. I think I'll just make a video about the router and APIs. So like and subscribe, okay? Heads up, some of this was changed by the time I finished the build, but let's keep going for now. Right now, I'm preparing some JSON responses that the front end can easily interpret. Here's how it will work. When a login request is made, the backend will validate the credentials. If the validation fails, the server will return a JSON object with a false value and an error message. The JavaScript on the front end will then parse that JSON and display the error to the user. On the other hand, if the validation succeeds, the server will return a JSON response with a true value and possibly a redirect URL. The front end reads that JSON, interprets the true response, and then navigates the user to the appropriate page. This works because PHP's JSON encode function converts arrays or objects into a JSON string that can be sent back to the client. On the JavaScript side, the response is usually parsed automatically into a JavaScript object, or you can explicitly call response.json when working with fetch. Once in object form, it's easy to check conditions, display messages, or redirect based on the values inside the JSON. So I didn't want to cut while explaining that part, but right now I'm debugging an error. The first problem was that the users table was completely empty. And since I hadn't added a condition for when no user is found, every single line of code that depended on having a user failed instantly. To fix that, I wrote a function that would populate some default users. But then another issue popped up. I couldn't insert those users into the database properly because of a bind rule. Basically, the system wouldn't let me add raw strings directly to the bind parameter. So that's why you see me going back and forth here on screen, chasing down what was happening. At first, I couldn't spot the problem, even though it's one of those errors I've run into so many times before. All right, let me just cut to the chase. I got tired of debugging. Honestly, the whole time I was building this, I kept asking myself, why didn't I just start with Laravel? Why not Laravel? So at one point, I gave in. I opened my terminal, decided to spin up a new Laravel project, tried to install the dependencies, couldn't remember the command. So I asked ChatGPT, got the right one, ran it, hit an installation problem, and that's when I just laughed, stopped, and went straight back to building it custom. The real reason I didn't stick with Laravel here comes down to authentication. I want to create a flexible user roles and permissions system. Now, I know Laravel has an authentication package. I've used it before. But the problem is, I could only ever make one role with it, or maybe a couple of defaults if I pushed it. That doesn't cut it for me because I don't want to box myself in. I need something much more flexible. So if anyone out there actually knows of a Laravel package or even a method that makes truly flexible roles and permissions possible, let me know. So I went back to the project, fixed that bug, and then it was time to dive into the real deal. This is where I started customizing the auth model, changing some of its core functions and adding new ones. Things like recording login attempts, incrementing or clearing those attempts, and setting up session tracking when a user logs in or checks Remember Me. On top of that, I worked on handling password reset requests, generating secure codes to send out, and basically putting all the little pieces together to make authentication complete.